elaborate more on the difference between Eastern and Western approach and the kind of misconception people have towards Eastern approach?
Yeah, that's a very important point, I think. There's a tendency to think of Eastern philosophy and Western fact. But if you actually look at the data, you get a very different picture. And the difference between the Eastern approach and the Western approach is that the Western approach goes in to deal with the problem itself, identifying a cause. So for example, if it's measles, you think of what's the germ, and then you look at ways of how do you kill the germ, or you just let it run its course. The Eastern approach is something quite different. It looks at how do you achieve and maintain balance in the system. Because your body it's like an ecosystem. And you have to maintain balance so that all aspects of it are properly energized. The belief is, or the premise is, that if you're in a state of balance, your immune system will deal with any problem. So if it's a chronic illness, it will deal with the things that are causing the chronic illness. When it comes to what is the cause, there is two very different approaches between the East and the West. For example, with infectious diseases, you think of the germ as the cause. In fact, that's not the case. Cause requires two things. It must be necessary and it must be sufficient. Now, certainly you can't get measles if the measles germ is not present. But the fact is you can have the measles germ present without having measles. So it's necessary and it's sufficient, doesn't apply to the germ. What it does apply to is the immune system. More and more research is discovering that you only fall sick if the immune system malfunctions. So the difference is that rather than looking for a way of dealing with what is seen as an external cause, the Eastern approach says the cause is a malfunction in the immune system. If you can rebalance the system, the immune system won't malfunction, therefore you won't get sick. And so if I think of my own life experience, I can tell you the occasions on which I have lost the balance and 3 days later I know I'm going to get a cold or a cough or something. And then I don't take medication as such. I don't take pharmaceuticals, I take some vitamin C and I do some meditation and it clears up within 24 hours. So I didn't need the medication to deal with it. But I can tell you what caused the imbalance that resulted in the problem. So that's my experience. It would be dismissed as anecdotal, but it for me confirms the Eastern approach as being valid. And a lot of chronic illness is now seen as malfunction of the immune system. For example, a heart attack. The old theory was that a heart attack is caused by a clot that blocks blood supply to the heart. And the clot will be a build-up of plaque. It blocks the artery. Nice theory, but it has no basis in fact. Apparently, you can have any amount of cholesterol, any amount of plaque building up, because beyond a certain point, it leaks into the artery wall and the immune system quite routinely disposes of it. You know, it's like if you have a sink with 2 taps and you open them full, it builds up to a certain point and then it stabilizes. It doesn't always overflow. If the weight of water is pushing the water out at the same speed that it's coming in, right, you don't get any overflow. Turn off the taps, the water goes down. But while the taps are flowing, it's at the same level. It's a bit like that with plaque. At a certain level, it starts leaking through the artery wall, and the immune system quite routinely disposes of it. But if your immune system has been overtaxed, which means you've gone out of balance, it can get to the point where the next bit of plaque that's leaking into the artery wall makes it lose its temper, and then it invades the artery and blows up all the plaque inside. It's like, so on top of all my work, now I have to do this, and you've taken away half my stuff, I'll show you. And it goes in and blows up all the plaque. The debris from those explosions cause the clot that blocks the blood flow to the heart, and that part of the heart dies. So you could never get a heart attack if your immune system doesn't lose its temper. So that's an illustration of the difference between working with the body to maintain balance and just looking at the disease and finding some pharmaceutical that will deal with or a surgical intervention. That's the basic difference.
Okay, interesting. Often science and spirituality is looked upon as mutually exclusive. But in your approach to health, the two seem to be very closely linked to one another.
Right.
Would you elaborate?
See, historically, survival of Western science required that they separated body and spirit. Galileo wrote in a letter to somebody called the Grand Duchess Christina that what the scientists they were dealing with was a philosophy of things. He called it the mechanical philosophy. It's just how things work. And that what the church was dealing with was the philosophy of salvation, right? Theology. That was, you said, the queen of sciences. See, in spite of kowtowing to the church, he was put under house arrest, he was shown instruments of torture, he had to say that the sun did not occupy center stage with the earth moving around it in a double motion. So there was a historical reason for separating body and spirit, right? Now it turns out that that really is a completely artificial split that has no reality. There's a book called Molecules of Emotion, written by a woman called Candice Pert, that shows that every cell in the body has neurotransmitters and neuroreceivers, and every mood shift changes the chemical composition of every cell. So there really isn't a separation between mind and spirit. Going a little bit deeper, there's the story of a woman called Anita Murjani that really gives us some very useful connection between one's life purpose and the state of your body, your health. The Western model says there isn't a relationship between consciousness and the body because it excludes consciousness. But the Eastern relationship sees a close relationship. Now, Anita Murjani's example was that over a period of time, she got cancer and it spread, and in the last 4 years before this particular experience, she was in pain. She said her upper body was covered with lumps of these tumors. She then had an experience that put her in touch with her life purpose while she was unconscious in hospital. Now, what's interesting is that there is the record in the hospital. 4 days later, the cancer was 70% down. And in a matter of days, she was completely clear, and I heard her on an interview with Manila Television, talking 8 years later. Right? She's completely cured. And it's simply that she got in touch with her life purpose and decided she was going to manifest that. Right? So there is a relationship between purpose and physiology. And that changes our whole approach to health. So I've come up with what I call a behavioral health program where you need to look at getting in touch with what is your life purpose. That's part of your physical health. You need to understand that the body has a time structure. Very few people are aware that the body has tides, just like the tides of the sea. And at high tide you're much stronger, at low tide you're very weak. So for example, a poison pill that can kill you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is a low tide point, the body can assimilate without you knowing you've had it at 8 o'clock in the evening, which is a high tide point. So you need to understand that the body has a time structure and work with it, not against it. The quality of sleep you get between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is quite different. And you need that. And most of us don't respect that need of our body. Then there's a certain amount of work that has to happen with exercise. Exercise actually is a matter of hygiene. It's the way you cleanse the inside of your body. It's not just about building muscle and looking sexy. And then there are other things like that and looking after the nutritional needs of the body.
How about meditation, Ranjan? How does meditation?
Meditation is part of getting in touch with your life purpose. So it's part of that program, and that needs to underpin how you live your life if you want to be healthy.
Okay.
Right? Cecil B. DeMille, the famous film producer, came up with a beautiful line. He said, "You can't break the law. You can only break yourself against the law. Our physiology is governed by laws. You can disrespect them, but you can't escape the consequences of that disrespect, which is ill health, disease, and finally death." Right? But if you respect those laws, there is also a consequence, which is high levels of energy, manifesting your life's purpose, and enjoying a high level of health.